Welcome to this week's Advisor Team Weekly webinar. As you know, these webinars take place every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. These webinars are directed towards our small business owners that we consult day to day. We talk about those topic items we discuss with our business credit owners, things from management to finance, building business credit, and so on. We had a great suggestion for a topic this week from one of our business owners. He asked me to go over the frequently asked questions, the things that our customers ask most, and I thought it was a wonderful idea. As you all know, you can submit a topic that you are interested in by emailing advisor@businessfinancesuite.com. You can also submit your questions during this webinar. I will stop throughout the webinar to go through the current list of questions. And this is a great way to get interaction throughout this webinar and really answers those questions that you have instead of just listening. Okay, well, let's dive in today. Let me get this slideshow started. As I mentioned, today we're talking about those frequently asked questions. And I'm going to go through them. And then, like I said, also review the questions that come in as we go through the webinar. The first item we're going to talk about is the credibility section. What are the common questions we get within the program and as we're consulting business owners? How do I file my business entity? And you know, a lot of these things sound elementary, but when you dig into it, of course, it's a little more complex than it seems on the surface. And so that's why I'm reviewing them today, because you may feel like, you know, I have my entity filed, but there may be little details that you haven't taken into account. So hang in there with us, submit your questions as we go. The first most common question we go over, or the most common pitfall we run into as we consult with our small business owners, is how do I file my business entity? They may have been in business for quite some time, but they're operating as a sole proprietorship. Now, what is a sole proprietorship? That is essentially you personally operating as a business, doing business as ABC Tire Shop, for example. It keeps you personally in the mix of the business. So it's you doing business. You're personally liable if anything goes south. And when you get your financing, it really is under your personal name. So that's something to take in consideration. This is why we recommend that you form an actual business entity. The way you do this is filing with the state that you operate your business in. Each state operates that function differently, but in general, they follow the same standards. So for instance, in the state of Florida, you would file at sunbiz.org and you're submitting your articles of incorporation or the applicable document and just stating, look, I have a business entity that I would like to file. Here's the entity. It is separate from me as an individual, and here's the entity name. Now, the state will protect that business name, meaning that nobody else can file a business name with the exact same business name. Now, some states are pickier about that than others. I know some states, if it's even close, they will decline that business name. Others, if the period is in a different spot, they'll still let you file it. So keep that in mind, especially as you're starting to build your business and you're selecting names. I've had customers that have fortunately got business cards printed before they submitted the entity. And what happened was that entity name already existed. So they had to pick something else and their business cards were no longer valid. So you would hate to be in that situation. That's why in step one, the very first item we have listed is that business entity, because even if the corporation has one, we want to make sure it's filed correctly. We talked about where do you file? It's with the state. Now, there are some instances where a company will file in a state different than the state they operate in. In that situation, you need to foreign file in the state that the business actually operates. For instance, if your entity is filed in the state of Nevada, but your business operates in the state of Minnesota, you would need to foreign file in the state of Minnesota. This gives lenders and those that need to verify the business existence a paper trail showing, look, the company is filed in the state of Nevada, but we operate in the state of Minnesota. Oftentimes as a lender, I would get an application and it showed that the business address was in Minnesota. So naturally, I'd look at the Secretary of State, Minnesota, and I would not find the entity. There was no way for me to know that the entity was filed in the state of Nevada. And so what it looks to me like is they didn't file the entity. In talking with a customer after the decline, I would find that they were actually filed in a different state, but on those lower loan amounts, as we know, that process is very automated. So it would take quite a bit to overturn that decline. So that gives you a glimmer into why it's important to file correctly, and to also foreign file in those select situations. Not all of you need to foreign file. If you're incorporated in the state you operate, you do not need to foreign file. That's a little tidbit that happens to some business owners from time to time. Okay, how do you know if you filed correctly? Typically, these legal documents feel a little overwhelming. There's a lot of them. The verbiage is not so easy to read. It seems they make it as complicated as possible. So this is a common question we get. How do I know I filed correctly? Or this is the most common phrase, what are all these papers? And so we can go through that with you in the advisor line. Typically, you'll have articles of incorporation, lists of officers, things like that come from the state. Once it's filed, it'll come back stamped or sealed, stating that your corporation was officially filed with the state. So you'll generally have those documents. It is recommended that you have your meeting minutes that are updated annually, and most states will require that you renew your corporation or LLC annually also. Beyond that, it's not that complex. You'll file for your EIN number and so on, but those basic root documents are the same really in any state that you file in. It is important that you look at the business name, address, and the ownership listed. That name, business name, address, and contact information listed on your entity should be the same on all of your business records. So that is the root of where your entity starts. So when you set up your bank account, your EIN number, your phone number, you're always going to use the same business name and address that you used when you filed that entity. So it's very important that you did that correctly and that you're carrying that throughout the setup of your corporation. Now, what if it's wrong? What if you have moved, things like that? You will update the Secretary of State with the correct information. And don't forget, you need to update everybody, the IRS, any accounts you have, things like that. A lot of times, business credit is reported using the business name and address. So if anything doesn't check out, it could create multiple profiles or declines, depending on how the lender underwrites. Okay, the last one in the credibility section is the most common question. How do I get my EIN number? And do I pay somebody to do it for me? If you have the patience and you're detailed enough, you can get your own EIN number on the IRS website. It's quite simple, actually. Like I talked about, oftentimes the verbiage is complex and so it may be confusing, but you are perfectly capable of logging in to irs.gov and applying for that free DUNS number. You'll want to make sure the information you submit is the same information you use, like I said, on that corporate entity, but you can do it. There are services out there that'll do it for you, like LegalZoom and My Corporation and so on. That is just fine to use them. They'll do a good job and make sure it's done correctly. But if you want to save the money, you can also do it yourself. So those are some great options for you. Our next section, we're going to talk about the financing. But before we do that, let's see if we have any questions that have come in. No questions so far. Well, keep in mind you can submit those questions as we go through this webinar, but I will keep going. Our next section is the financing section. Okay, here we go. So financing. What financing do I qualify for? That's usually the most common question we get because let's be honest, that is one of the hardest hurdles when you're running your business is getting the financing you need to grow. And it's confusing. Which lender do you visit? Which lender is going to give you the most financing? How do you apply correctly? Which application? Which product do I apply for? Which contact do I work with at the bank? Do I work with the manager, the business representative, or can I work with my personal banker? Do I respond to those pre-approvals or those credit card applications that come through the mail? Those are common questions that we get, and that's really the root of how this program started. It's very confusing. When you talk to any business lender, they will know they have this box, and if the customer fits within that box, they can help. If not, they have to turn the customer away, and that's very frustrating. They also know that other lenders may be able to help the customer. Maybe this bank doesn't like doing lines of credit, but the bank down the road does. And if the customer knew that, they would go to the other bank that prefers to lend for those lines of credit. Now, we are armed with that information, and that's why the program is valuable. So, with your guidance from the advisor team and the finance officers, we guide you through that process. In step 2, you answer the basic questions we need to know in order to start that computing of, hey, this is what your business qualifies for right now, and here's what you can do to qualify for more down the road. Having that map allows you to make real decisions. Sometimes we may be under the assumption that business credit works just like personal, and that's not factual. Business credit can be a little harder to get, but it's important that you don't use your personal credit in most situations to get financing because as that debt reports on your personal credit reports, it's hurting your personal debt to income ratios, your revolving percentages, and it can actually make it so you can't qualify for more financing. That's one of the more common hurdles we run into, where a customer has maxed out their personal credit cards because they were most comfortable getting those, and that lends them to, it makes it so they're not fundable anymore. We can't go for the cheaper forms of financing with the personal guarantee, even though it's business finance. We have to go on the revenue-based finance or build the business credit to get financing that way. Or collateralized financing. There's other options, but it does shut down some of the financing options you may have. As you have this real blueprint, it gives you real ideas about what you can qualify for. So as you're planning on how you want your business to grow, you can take the financing into consideration. That's one of the more common missteps that a business owner makes. They have these great ideas, but the realistic side of it is, can I get the financing to make this happen? And if we don't really know, then we're operating under pretenses where we can't control the outcome. If the financing can't take place, then we can't foresee those ideas, and the planning no longer has a positive effect on the business. If we can make plans based on what is realistic, then it really adds up to success a lot easier. Okay, why don't I qualify for more financing? Sometimes what we have to do is provide that reality of what options are out there. And though that's hard, it's important for the business owner to understand. And that doesn't mean you don't have a lot of options. You do. It just may not be a $500,000 line of credit with 2% interest rate. So we have to set those realistic expectations, really lay out what the finance market has in store for you so you can make those plans accordingly. Why don't you qualify for more? It's all about thinking like a lender. It would always be the market that's limiting you. So what is the collateral? How easy is it for them to liquidate it? How long have you been in business? How risky is the industry? How long have you been in running this type of business? What is your experience? What type of revenue is coming through? How much is the business spending? Are there tax returns, financial statements? Is there a personal guarantee? All of these factors come into play. There's always a lender that can lend just based on revenue or based on collateral, and doesn't take all of those factors into consideration. Then there's other lenders that do, like those for a line of credit, where they melt almost every factor that makes a business credible into the pot to help them make their decision. That's why you need somebody on your side to help you with this planning process. And that's why you're with us, is so we can really lay out that financing blueprint and give you a good, clear idea. Hey, this is realistic. This is really what you qualify for. This is what you don't qualify for. If you do this, you will qualify for it. And let's go from there. What will my interest rate be? It's one of my favorites. We call it the crystal ball question. We really don't know until we get all the factors in that will determine the rate. We have to get to the detail in order to know what the interest rate will be. Just like on credit cards, they can quote you from 6 to 45%. They don't know until they look at all of the underwriting guidelines. So if you ever ask that to a lender, the answer will always be the same. It's typically this wide range. The only way they can narrow that down is by looking at the details. So you typically have to submit an application in order to really know what the interest rate will be, and so on. How do I apply? This is a great one. Seems very simple. You submit the application. The thing is so many business owners run into hiccups when submitting their application. Things like not writing legibly, handwriting the application, not including all of the fields, writing the incorrect industry, inflating the gross sales. Those type of things can really hurt the application process. There's definitely a process on how to apply correctly. So as you're going through the program, you'll want to follow our advice there and talk with the advisors as you have questions. But the biggest things are what I just mentioned: writing legibly, typing it in, putting the correct and real information, not overestimating numbers like your gross sales, and inflating any numbers that can be seen as fraudulent. In fact, and when you sign at the bottom, you're basically stating all the information is true and correct to the best of your knowledge. So you want to make sure to fill out those applications correctly. That's a normal pitfall that we see. Probably the second most common thing is not filling out all the fields on an application. Who do I apply with? We talked about that a little bit. Which bank is going to be the best fit? If you think about it, that would be hard for you to know as a business owner because you're not regularly shopping for financing. That's not something you're doing every day. And since lenders don't publish their underwriting criteria, there would be no way to know exactly what product or what bank you should apply with. And that's where we're helpful, is we are frequently in that world, constantly submitting applications, talking with the lenders and underwriters, so we have a decent idea of who is going to be the best bank and lender to apply with. So you'll want to stay close to us, let us wear that finance hat with you, and work with us as we guide you through who your best options might be. Okay, let's see if we've got any questions that have come in. Oh, I had somebody say they can't hear, although I have it started on my side. So if that's the case for all of you, I will put the recording in YouTube video so that you can hear it. I'm going to type that response. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we'll continue on. The next section is business credit. Okay, so one of the more common questions we get is, does my business have business credit reports? Well, unlike personal credit, it's not as common that a business knows if they even have business credit reports. It's kind of pushed to the side. You work on the other things, but You know, it's always frustrating when a business owner goes to apply for financing and we're surprised by a negative item that shows on the business credit report. We don't want our customers to run into that. So, one of our early steps is pulling those business credit reports so there are no surprises. And of course, building that business credit more, it can tip the scales to an approval. So, we want to take that into consideration and know if the business does have credit reports. How do I pull the business credit reports? We're all very used to a tri-merge report from the personal credit side. That doesn't so much exist on the business credit side. We Creditera is pretty new in the space, and they're doing something really interesting, which is they do allow you to monitor the DMB and Experian credit scores in one. And then they also report positive payments to the business credit bureaus to build the business credit. So that's a great service. But in general, to see a full credit report, you'll need to purchase the monitoring directly with each business credit bureau. How do I correct information on my business credit reports? So if there's negative items that have reported on your business credit and they shouldn't be there, they're incorrect, you can dispute them. And there's a different process with each bureau. We have the links on our website and instructions how to do that in step number 3. If they have incorrect information, meaning the business name, address, and so on is incorrect, you'll submit that to that specific credit bureau to have them update it with Experian and DMB. You can submit the correct information and have them update your records. The issue comes with Equifax. They typically will not update your business credit records. What they tell you to do is update your information with your creditors, because it is in fact the creditors reporting the old business name and address. Therefore, it's showing on the business credit report. So in step 3, we iron this out pretty detailed. Like I said, with DMB and Experian, there's a certain area you contact, you have them update your records. With DMB, you can even go in there and update it yourself, and they will verify that. With Equifax, you have to actually update it with the vendors that are reporting to get that corrected. Why are my bank loans reporting on my business credit reports? Or even better, why aren't my bank loans reporting on your business credit reports? Most commonly, the bank financing isn't going to show on your business credit reports. Although, interestingly enough, they check them during their underwriting process to approve you. So that Chase credit card, that Wells Fargo line of credit, and so on, those typically are not going to report on your business credit reports, nor can you add them as a manual reference with DMB, because DMB's agreement is not to contact banks or utility companies. So it would have to be just with vendors. It's a catch-22. Those bank lenders are pulling the business credit but not reporting back. Some do on Equifax, but it's very common a majority do not report. So it's important for you to be aware of that. That solidifies why it's so important to build using the trade accounts and so on. Why do I build my business credit? Well, we were getting to that, right? So the reason you build business credit is because these lenders are pulling it. They're using it to verify the business information, the name, address, the ownership, where you're located, what type of industry you're in. They want to make sure the business is real. And the business credit is another way for them to verify that. On top of it, it shows them that you're paying your bills on time or you're paying them late. It shows them any UCC filings, liens, judgments. Those type of things also show on your business credit reports. So they use business credit for multiple reasons, these lenders, and this is why we need to build business credit. In addition to this, that it can be helpful to use vendor credit. Sometimes we don't stretch our minds to realize that those gas cards, the Home Depot cards, things like that can really help your business and free up cash flow on a day-to-day scenario. So you'll want to step back and think about, how can these vendor accounts really help me? and how can I utilize them to free up the cash flow? And so that's another reason we build the business credit, so that you can also qualify for the business credit cards that don't require a personal guarantee. Now, keep in mind, to qualify for those business credit cards that can be used anywhere and don't require a personal guarantee, you have to have at least 10 trade accounts reporting and a high credit limit to qualify. So you're going to have to build the business credit in order to qualify for those. And we'll walk you through that in step 4 and 5. Here's another really common question. How do I get a DUNS number, and what do I need to purchase with DMB? DMB is pretty aggressive in their sales tactics, and very often I get a concerned phone call from one of my business owners stating DMB's calling. They're telling me I am getting a lot of inquiries, or I have to purchase this in order to build business credit. And so we try and cut through the confusion, make it very clear. Look, you can get a free DUNS number. You can pay them $49 to get it within a week. You can purchase the monitoring to activate a DUNS number. And, you can pay for the credit builder monitoring with the DMB if you want to add manual references, or just the regular monitoring. So there's lots of options. I know DMB is pretty aggressive, so you'll want to consult with the advisor team so we can cut through that and make it simple. We have a lot of information on our website too. Okay. The next section is trade accounts. Let's check back and see if anybody's got questions. Okay. Okay, here we go. So the next section is trade accounts, and this is the last segment we're going to go over today. If you have any other questions, you can submit those. Trade accounts, who do I apply with? There's so many business credit accounts out there, tons. You could go to Tiffany's, you could go to Sears. Sears has multiple business credit and commercial accounts, but who do I apply with? Which one do I apply for? Some of them are going to require a social security number, others won't. Some require a social security number if you don't have enough business credit already reporting. Some will always have that filled, but lo and behold, you don't even have to enter a number and they'll still approve. So who do you apply with? There's an art to it. Not all of them, even though they do have the business account, they may always require a personal guarantee, and that's not a good fit for you. Or there's lots of business credit accounts out there that don't report, as we discussed, to the business credit reports, even though they check it. So there is an art in knowing who do you apply with, and that's what we go through in step 4 and 5. Why did I get declined? Typically, when a customer calls with this, there's a reason. So the business information may not be correct on all the business records. They're not listed under 411. They applied too soon for the account. Something like Staples that requires some prior business credit history, we applied with them before that was there. Therefore, it was declined. So there's typically a reason, and we just have to dig in and get to the bottom of it. Why aren't my trade accounts reporting? This is a common question, and what's important to understand is a trade account reports once a payment is made. So it's not the actual opening of the account, it's not the credit limit that reports, it's the payment that is made that triggers the reporting. Now, on average, it takes them 30 to 60 days to report the payment on the business credit report. So if you open the account on April 1st, but you didn't make a payment until March 1st, it's going to take 30 to 60 days from March 1st in order for that trade account to report. Okay. Another reason would be that your business information is not correct. The business name and address that you use to set up the trade account is different than the business name and address that shows on the business credit report. So if that's the situation, the vendor submitting the correct the business name and address and payment information to the Business Credit Bureau, but they're not able to match it up with a file because your file is set up differently. Business credit isn't reported using an EIN number or a DUNS number. It's with that business name and address. Okay, the next item is how many trade accounts do I need to get credit cards, business credit cards without a personal guarantee? 10 trade accounts and a $10,000 high credit limit usually does the trick. And that's what we recommend. You will have that if you work through step 4 and 5. By the end of step 5, you will have those 2 requirements. Well, that is what we have today. Let's check one more time to see if we have questions. Okay. I just had lots of questions on they couldn't hear it, so we will send out the recording. It looks like some are able to hear, others are not. As you know, you can call the advisor team anytime you have questions. The phone number is 800-497-0499. You can also email advisor@businessfinancesuite.com. We're always here to help. You can also submit your frequently asked questions, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.